Good morning, welcome to CATEX-TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. This is a live broadcast from Princeton, New Jersey. Today is Wednesday, November 17, 2010. It's 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S., 4:30 p.m. in London. In Mexico City, it's 10:30 a.m. If you need to reach us during the broadcast, you can phone in toll-free at 1-866-67-CATEX. Overseas, our AOL instant mail address is CATEX-TV. We'll go directly to the news. The Bermudian reinsurer Platinum Underwriters just announced that rising costs from the New Zealand earthquake will cost it $40 million in the fourth quarter of this year. They had reported $28.5 million in Q3, so this is up to $68-point-something million already. Platinum is saying that the increase is partly due to the impact of foreign exchange rates. The Australian dollar is running pretty strong these days, so I guess that's what the claims, of course, are coming in those denominations. In Germany, there's a new terror alert out. Authorities are stepping up security at airports and railway stations after they've received concrete indications that Islamic extremists plan to stage an attack. The Interior Minister, pictured here, Thomas de Maizière, said the government felt compelled to issue a warning of a new threat level after receiving intelligence from an unnamed foreign partner and gathering evidence domestically from its own Islamist groups. De Maizière said there is cause for concern, but no cause for hysteria. He said the public will begin to see an increased security presence, but there will be a large number of measures they won't be able to see. This warning, of course, follows the worldwide terror alert prompted last month after bombs were mailed from Yemen. One such bomb that was programmed to explode over the U.S. East Coast had passed through Germany via the Cologne-Bonn airport. The Interior Minister said that Germany received additional intelligence after that incident and compared the threat level to the weeks before the September 2009 federal elections. Further clues apparently came from Germany's Federal Crime Bureau, their equivalent of the FBI, and sources in the country's Islamist scene. A German court in March sentenced 4 men belonging to an Islamist terrorist cell to as many as 12 years in prison for their part in a thwarted bomb attack that authorities said could have been the worst in Germany's post-World War II history. And that's saying quite a lot in a country with the history of the Baader-Meinhof gang. Well, the British government said today that it could offer direct financial assistance to Ireland, even though Britain is outside the Eurozone. Here's Irish Finance Minister Lenihan arriving in Brussels. The European Union is struggling to contain an Irish debt crisis. Finance ministers from the 16 Euro countries decided late last night to intensify talks with Ireland on possible financial assistance. The ministers also signaled continuing concerns about the situation in Greece. Joining the group this morning, George Osborne, the British Chancellor of the Exchequer — Britain, of course, does not use the euro — noted that British banks are the most heavily exposed to the Irish financial sector and that it was, quote, in Britain's national interest that the Irish economy is successful and we have a stable banking system. He went on to say Britain stands ready to support Ireland in the steps that it needs to take to bring about that stability. Isn't that something? The EU Commissioner for Economic and Monetary Affairs, Olli Rehn, said earlier that the talks would now move to Ireland to prepare a possible rescue package. He said the European Commission was in discussions with both the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund and, quote, of course, the Irish. Thank goodness. Well, China's government announced food subsidies this morning for poor families as it continues to try to deal with a double-digit increase in prices for food that communist leaders worry might stir unrest. The cabinet promised to ease shortages of vegetables and grain that helped push up food prices by more than 10% in 1 month, the month of October. The government promised more supplies of diesel to end fuel shortages that have disrupted trucking and industry. The government said it was not ordering direct price controls, but said that they could be imposed if necessary. Inflation is politically volatile in China, where poor families spend up to half their incomes on food. Surging food prices are not confined to China, with agriculture in other countries also hurt by unpredictable weather from drought due to storms and floods. And in France, the French President Nicolas Sarkozy has announced the launch of a period of study on long-term care. This is an issue seen by insurers as a potentially significant market opportunity. Speaking in a TV interview last night, Sarkozy said that a large 6-month consultation involving regional councils, unions, and senior citizens associations would take place to address the issue of, quote, the colossal financing deficit for old age dependency. He insisted that the issue would be dealt with before the end of his term in 2012. French insurers have long supported a principle of a public-private partnership, which the state provides incentives to buy long-term care insurance. Henri de Castries, the head of AXA, said last night a change in legislation could open up a huge market for insurers. Sarkozy said last night in his televised remarks that the French population by 2040 will have increased by 13%, with the number of people over the age of 60 reaching half the population, 50%. We'll go to a word from our sponsors and come back with the rest of the news. The London-based insurance holding company Omega Insurance has admitted that it purchased additional reinsurance in the third quarter to further reduce its catastrophe exposures. Omega said that net loss estimates for the Chile earthquake, Deepwater Horizon, the Abin Pearl, and U.S. and Australian windstorms remain in line with previously disclosed estimates at the end of Q3. The only significant loss during the 3 months ending September 30th, 2010 was the New Zealand quake in September, which Omega has reserved for a loss of $6.2 million. The news came this morning as Omega reported a 25% growth in the group's gross written premium for the first 9 months of the year. It jumped from $247 million last year up to $308 million. So that's pretty good. They have no need to apologize for buying reinsurance. That's what it's there for. Well, in May, an Air India 737 crashed. Now we know why. 158 passengers. The pilot slept through more than half the flight. He woke up disoriented when it was time to land the plane. This is according to an investigative panel appointed by a court of inquiry. The crash concluded that the flight commander, Zlatko Glushia, was disoriented, and his reactions were slow after he woke up while bringing the plane in for a landing at Mangalore Airport. The Air India Express flight from Dubai to Mangalore overshot a runway, which was unfortunately perched on a hilltop, crashed and plunged over a cliff, killing 158 people instantly. The study said that the pilot reacted late and did not follow many standard operating procedures during the landing. It cited that it artfully described what he was suffering from as sleep inertia after his nap, and he was disoriented when the plane began its descent. Flight data recorders caught the sound of heavy nasal snoring and heavy breathing. The co-pilot is heard warning the pilot to abort the landing and try the procedure again. The last words captured by the recorders as the plane crashed were those of one of the pilots saying, "Oh my God." The pilot, Glushia, had more than 10,200 hours of flying experience, so no one is immune. Well, we hate doing this because they have the best safety record in the world, but another Qantas flight was forced to turn around today. Not due, this is for engine problems, but it wasn't because of equipment, it was because of birds. Birds struck one of the 4 engines on Qantas Flight 64 from Johannesburg to Sydney just after takeoff. The plane had 171 passengers. Qantas said that the bird strike did considerable damage to the engine of one of the 747s. To one of the engines on the Boeing 747. The plane had to return to Johannesburg immediately, and it's going to be there indefinitely until Qantas can repair it. Here's an interesting story. U.S. government and military internet traffic was briefly redirected through computer services and servers in China earlier this year. This is according to a report released today by the U.S.-China Economic and Security Commission. The report says that telecommunications companies in China disrupted the internet for about 18 minutes. They, quote, hijacked about 15% of the world's online traffic, including NASA, the U.S. Senate, and 4 branches of the American military, as well as the Office of the Secretary of Defense. A draft copy of the report says that for about 18 minutes on April 8, 2010, China Telecom advertised erroneous network traffic routes that instructed U.S. and other foreign internet traffic to travel through Chinese servers. While the hijacking back in April was initially reported, it had not been disclosed that American government agencies were affected by the incident. The report went on to say, quote, this incident affected traffic to and from the U.S. government and military sites, including those for the Senate, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Office of Secretary of Defense, NASA, the Department of Commerce, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and many others. Certain commercial websites were also affected, such as those for Dell, Yahoo, Microsoft, and IBM. The Commission mentioned possible security risks. It also indicated that this type of access could enable surveillance of specific users or sites. It could also disrupt a data transaction, or possibly even allow for a diversion of data somewhere that the user did not intend. Entities in China were behind a very sophisticated attack of Google and 30 other companies that occurred late last year, due apparently to an attempt to gain access to the email accounts on Google of human rights activists in China. Well, it seems that even famous people can have regular pedestrian problems. Here's a picture of Neil Young, who turned 65 years old yesterday. Neil Young is, of course, a rock star. I guess being a rock star, you have a whole slew of things that you own. You don't have room in your house for, so if you're a rock star, what do? You rent a warehouse. Well, there was a 3-alarm fire in his warehouse the other day out in San Carlos, California. The fire caused a considerable amount of damage, about $1 million worth of damage, and apparently it had begun in a vintage car that Mr. Young had converted into a hybrid vehicle. The car was a 1959 Lincoln Continental. Young had outfitted the car with electric batteries and a biodiesel power generator as part of his company called LinkVolt. The company promotes the conversion of gas-guzzling cars into vehicles that run on alternative energy. Mr. Young said that the 19.5-foot car actually has increased fuel efficiency. He, in fact, has converted 2 of his other cars, a Mercedes-Benz and a Hummer, to run on used vegetable oil. It sounds like that John Travolta movie with after he gets struck by the alien beam and comes up with all these ideas. Mr. Young said he bought the Lincoln, the 19.5-foot Lincoln, about 15 years ago after it had been in a domestic dispute. He said the guy's wife had poured hydraulic fluid all over it. He then reconverted it and put the batteries in. For short trips, the converted car got around 40 miles per gallon, compared with 9 or 10 for the original model. The LinkVolt was severely damaged. He said that we had operated it perfectly for almost 2,000 miles, so we know it's not an operational thing. He said we're investigating the components involved with the plug-in. Young also had other things in the warehouse, the 10,000-foot warehouse, square-foot warehouse, guitars, paintings, and other memorabilia, as well as other vintage cars. 70% of that stuff has been reported as salvageable. Well, interesting. I'm sure he'll be filing a claim.